The Apostle Paul is without doubt the most important theologian in Christian history. Yet rarely do we think about the physical conditions Paul had to operate under to bring the gospel to the ends of the earth. My name is Tim Foster, and in this series I'm leading a small group of Ridley students for a study trip of a lifetime.
Hang on!
We will be tracing Paul's missionary journeys, not just by land, but by sea. This is Following in the Wake of Paul.
You probably want to charge us 20 lira each.
Yeah, that's all right.
Getting the ropes. So well. Yeah, I woke up at like 1 and 3, proper sweating, like not just a little bit, and I was like, this is gross.
Just hold that for a minute, somebody.
But after, once I got to sleep, it was good. It was fine. Gentle rocking reminded me of being in my mother's arms.
Yeah, you let go.
Right, you right?
Yeah.
There you go.
Make it open, yeah. Ready to go, Rob? Are we? Yeah.
We're going right on 7.
I'm here in Turkey with 12 students from Ridley College, and today is day 2 on our sailing expedition as we follow in the wake of Paul's missionary journeys. The students were introduced to some basic boating techniques yesterday, but today I'm going to take it up a notch and show them a key sailing technique called tacking. So what is tacking and why do we need to do it? A sailing boat can't sail directly into the wind. When it needs to get from one point to another point that is directly into the wind, it has to do what's called in sailing terms a series of tacks or tacking. A tack is when a boat sails not directly but at a 45-degree angle to the wind, which is as close to the wind as it can do. At some point, the boat has to do another tack at 90-degree turn. Tacking is when a boat makes a series of these turns, travelling in a zigzag pattern to reach its destination into the wind. This makes sailing against the wind longer as the boat has to cover a greater distance.
So it feels like we've been going around that point for ages. We were on the other side of it, and it's now we're on this side of it, but it feels like that's been our marker.
There's a current. So this is probably about the sort of speed that Paul would have done along here. So his boats would probably do up to about 4 knots. But you know how today we had to tack because we couldn't go directly into the wind. And remember what our tacking angle was? How many degrees? 90 degrees. And obviously the narrower your tacking angle, the better. In his day, they were 140 degrees. So for him to go up into the wind, he'd go across there, tack, back here, tack, back there, tack. So even, they might be able to do 4 knots, but in the direction they want to go, it might be 1 mile an hour. And so when you read Acts chapter 20, and it talks about this journey we're doing, the third missionary journey, it lists, like in the space of 2 verses, 14 to 16, 3 verses, it lists the islands they hopped between. At that point hasn't moved much, still hesitates. Might be time to reach for the engine, a luxury Paul didn't have.
Well, with the help of a modern motor on our boat, we finally arrive at the ancient site of Patara. Well, we've made it to Patara after some adventures getting to shore, and we've come to the ancient city. Much of this would have been an ancient harbour that's silted up. This was the place where Paul came on the return leg of his third missionary journey. Now, I'm not showing the students around this site. They're on their own. This is one of the great things that we're doing today, is having the students find their own way around the site. They've been to so many over the last week and a half. It's now time for them to use that knowledge to analyse this site, to work out the layout of the city, the sort of buildings that are here, the function, to find hidden things like inscriptions and other cool stuff that's all around here. A great place to begin exploring any ancient Roman site is the city's theatre. The theatre was the entertainment hub of a Roman city, providing all sorts of amusement for its residents. Finding significant artefacts here should be a walk in the park for the students.
Okay. Oh, wow.
Patros, father, Sebastoi, that's emperor, and toi sepatois, theos, God. So it's relates to imperial worship, emperor worship. Very unusual. It's normally you don't get spacing between the words, but a lot of these have got spaces. Not everyone, but a lot of them. So why didn't the students come up and look at this? Just can't leave them alone.
In the 1st century, one of the fastest growing religious movements or religious associations was the imperial cult, which is the worship of the emperor, the Sebastos, the venerable one, the imperial family, and the might of Rome and Rome's armies. When Alexander the Great conquered parts of Egypt, Asia Minor, Palestine, and Persia, many of the people responded by giving worship to Alexander the Great, and Alexander began to be worshipped as a god. Now, the Greeks are a little bit weirded out about this, like Alexander's now calling himself a god, but they kind of went along with it. And as Alexander the Great's empire broke up, the same worship of kings and regents of certain small empires was continued, and they would be worshipped as a god, as a divine figure. And then as the Romans moved through the east, the same thing. The Romans would conquer an area and a few things would happen. They would, probably kill a lot of the army. They would enslave a lot of people, but the people they left in charge would then try to ingratiate themselves to Roman power. And one way they could do that was to begin to worship the emperor as a type of deity. Now, there was a number of things they could do. They could simply build a temple to the emperor and call it the Temple of Augustus, or the Temple of Vespasian, or the Temple of Trajan. They could do something like that. They could have a temple plus a priesthood. They could have temple, priesthood, and annual sacrifices. They could have a number of inscriptions celebrating, we celebrate how the God, Lord, and Saviour of the world has saved us from an invasion from barbaric tribes over the Danube.
The inscriptions were interesting, but as we move inside the theatre, we're reminded of the gruesome activities that took place here.
That's where the wild animals would have come out. So you can tell that this is Roman, not Hellenistic or Greek, because the Roman theatres lifted, they lifted the front row up, and this created a safe area so that when there are lions tearing apart people who they wanted to kill, they couldn't attack the crowd. And this is where they would have released them. They would have come through here out into the arena, and if they were going to be executing somebody through that method as the lunchtime entertainment, they would have come out here, lion charging behind them, bears, whatever it was. So this is exactly what sort of thing that would have happened here. So if any student writes about this theatre and doesn't include the inscriptions or the reliefs, they're going to get a fail. See, one of our biggest problems in reading the Bible is we read the Bible through 21st century eyes, and we can't help that because we're 21st century people and they're the eyes we've got. But to read the Bible well and properly, we need to read it through first century eyes.
I only get 4,000, that doesn't sound enough. So we've observed over here, I'm just going to turn you around. See the gladiator? There's like a shield of armour and a sword, which would indicate that this area here where we're standing is where people would have got chewed up by lions. Tim was saying this is originally a Greek theatre, which is why you can see there's a lip at the bottom, which would have been made up a seat. So all the rows come down and people can sit right to the bottom. When the Greeks originally used the theatre in the 2nd century BC for reading aloud poetry, and then subsequently the Romans came and added up this wall, which if you were stuck here as one of the gladiators, you would not be able to get over. So you're stuck here and change it to a Roman theatre.
Well, I have to hand it to the students, they've done pretty well on their own. So with all that hard and hot work done, it was time to reward them with a swim over the sunken ruins of another ancient site. In the next episode, I set a challenge for the students that puts them over the edge and threatens to put the boats on the rocks.
Oh dear. Oh dear. I think we're going to die.
And I sit down with Phil to discuss how sailing could be the key to developing a new generation of church leaders.
We've got too many people who want to be followers. We need more leaders. How do we give them the confidence? How do we give them the competence? Is it possible?
All this and more on Following in the Wake of Paul.